My name is Frank, and I've been farming this land my family has owned for over 100 years, scratching a humble but honest living out of the dirt, just like my grandfather did, long before the world got so loud, expensive, and crowded. We grow alfalfa and corn mostly, living a quiet life defined by early mornings, diesel fumes, the smell of fresh earth, and the changing seasons. But that peaceful existence was rudely shattered about 6 months ago when the county zoning board approved the Gilded Oaks, a sprawling, soulless development of cookie-cutter McMansions built right up against my northern property line. With the subdivision came the noise, the traffic, and worst of all, the homeowners association. And with the HOA came Karen, who seemed to think she owned the whole county. I don't know her real name, but you know the archetype and aggressive bob haircut that costs more than my truck? A permanent scowl of dissatisfaction, and a shiny white luxury SUV that had never seen a speck of dust in its life until she met me. My farmhouse sits about a half-mile off the main highway, and my northern field borders the back of her cul-de-sac. To get to the highway from her house, she has to drive 3 miles around the perimeter of my farm, a route that apparently wasted too much of her precious time. The trouble started on a Tuesday when I found a distinct set of tire tracks flattening a wide swath of my prize alfalfa, cutting a straight line from the subdivision edge right to the county road. I figured it was a lost contractor or maybe a confused delivery driver. Annoying but forgivable, until I saw it happen with my own eyes the very next afternoon. I was out checking the fence line when I saw that pristine white SUV barreling across my field like she was driving on the interstate, tearing up the soil and crushing the crop beneath expensive all-terrain tires that were strictly used for mall parking lots. Never seeing a day of real work. I waved my arms, shouting for her to stop. But she just honked at me on my own land and kept sailing toward the road without tapping the brakes. I was fuming, my blood boiling hotter than a radiator in July. So I hopped in my pickup and drove around to the subdivision entrance to wait. When she finally rolled back in that evening, I was there. I politely flagged her down, leaning out the window to explain that she was trespassing on private agricultural land and destroying my livelihood. She rolled her window down about 2 inches, looking at me like I was a bug on her windshield, and scoffed, telling me that it was just empty grass and that, as a member of the HOA board, she was entitled to efficient travel. She actually said she was shaving off 10 minutes from her commute and that I should be neighborly about it. I told her the next time she crossed that property line, there would be consequences, but she just laughed, rolled up the window, and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust in my face. I called the sheriff, and while the deputy was sympathetic, he said unless I caught her in the act or had video proof of the driver, it was a civil matter, basically telling me I was on my own until the legal system could catch up. That weekend, the weather forecast called for a gully washer, a massive storm system moving in from the west that promised to drop 3 inches of rain in one night. That gave me a glorious, muddy idea. See, that northern field used to have an old irrigation ditch running right along the edge where she liked to enter. But it had been filled in with loose topsoil years ago to make it easier for the tractors to turn around. It looked solid, especially with the grass growing over it, but underneath, it was soft. On Saturday, I fired up the old backhoe and spent the afternoon maintaining my drainage system. I dug that ditch out deep, about 4 feet down and 6 feet across, right in her preferred path. Then, I loosely filled it back in with the finest, softest silt and peat moss I could find, smoothing the top over so it looked perfectly level with the rest of the field. It looked like solid ground to the untrained eye, but it was essentially a bottomless pit waiting for water. The rain came down hard that night, a relentless deluge that turned my little engineering project into a saturated, invisible quagmire of unadulterated doom. Monday morning arrived with clear blue skies, the sun glistening off the wet grass. A beautiful day for a trap. I sat on my porch with a steaming cup of coffee, watching the clock. At 7:45 a.m., right on schedule, the white SUV appeared at the edge of the subdivision. She didn't even hesitate. She accelerated, likely thinking about her latte or her next HOA meeting, and drove straight off the pavement and onto my land. She picked up speed, confident and arrogant, sailing across the first 50 yards of firm turf until she hit the maintenance zone. The result was instantaneous and epic. The nose of that heavy SUV didn't just sink, it nosedived. The momentum carried the back end, up spinning the tires in the air for a split second before the whole vehicle slammed down into the muck with a wet, sickening thud that I could hear from the porch. Mud exploded outward like a geyser, coating the windshield, the hood, and the roof in thick brown sludge. The engine roared as she slammed on the gas, trying to power through, but that only made it worse. The wheels spun uselessly, digging her deeper and deeper until the frame was resting on the mud and the wheels were just churning chocolate soup, throwing grime everywhere with every futile rotation. I took a slow, satisfying sip of my coffee and strolled down to the field. By the time I got there, she was out of the car, standing in knee-deep mud in her office heels, shrieking at the top of her lungs about lawsuits and damages. I leaned against a fence post, tipped my cap, and told her she was trespassing in a designated drainage zone during a flood event. She demanded I use my tractor to pull her out. I told her my tractor was for farm work, not retrieving trespassers, and that a tow truck would probably charge a premium for an off-road recovery in a wetland. It took the tow company 3 hours and 2 trucks to winch her out, tearing up her bumper in the process. The bill was astronomical, likely more than the 10 minutes she saved was worth. She never drove across my land again. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the farm.